Well, it's wonderful to be here with you today, Chris. Look, we know each other, we worked with each other, but I still feel a sense of trepidation given the subject of this episode, which is all about communication. I imagine in the first minute, the name of one of your brilliant books, you're already thinking, David, God, you should have structured it differently. But hey, we all know that communication is important. Who doesn't? But how well do we do it? How well do we prepare? How do we master the key moments, whether it's sending off that important email, landing that important speech, or contributing to a meeting? These are topics you've all covered in your work as an expert trainer, best-selling author, and much, much more. And today is really going to be a masterclass where we're going to dredge, if you like, everything from you in terms of all your tips, lessons,
pull it all out,
successes, failures. And it's a masterclass. But before we dive in, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, David. And if you think the pressure's on for you, imagine the pressure I feel, because if I don't practice what I preach, I've kind of set my own bar and have to hit it.
It better be bloody brilliant now, I tell you. It better be brilliant. But anyway.
Made worse by the fact I've pointed it out. If I'd just gone through it, the stumbles would be
We're
okay.
both friends when we're amongst friends. So, but let's frame the conversations I always do. So we intuitively know that communication matters. It matters to our business at the aggregate. It matters to our performance at work and our recognition, to our brand and our reputation. But what gets in the way of us, not communicating in the way that we'd love to?
What gets in the way? Ourselves, time, pressure, lack of being taught how to do it. You can really take your pick from those. It's the first thing that gets in the way is we're never officially taught how to communicate at work. We learn how to communicate socially. We're brought up in a family, friend environment, and our first experience of non-social interaction is at school, which is generally we're on receive mode and giving very specific tasks that we may be able to interact with others. And then we leave schooling after 18 years of indoctrination into a certain type and format of communicating, and then we're expected to do it differently at work. So is it any wonder that we're not all brilliant communicators on day one in the job?
Yeah, no, so there's something about actually relearning or learning in a new context, and then there's actually doing the work. And you emphasize in many of your different books and your speeches the importance of structure communication. And I have to say, I have a sort of visceral reaction to that, which is, I know that's right, but there's part of me thinking, not too much structure. So tell me, what does it mean to be structured in how you both prepare and you deliver communications?
Yes. So being structured, let's start with what it's not. It doesn't mean become a boring robot. It doesn't mean become ChatGPT or become a textbook where you have to communicate in using the Cambridge grammar style guides or the Oxford style to grammar. It doesn't mean that. What structure means is organize your message to give it the greatest chance of being understood. And I'll give an example.
Beautiful. I love that. That sounds very good. Yeah.
It sounds very simple. It's a little bit harder to do. One, because there are lots of different structures you could use. And two, because like many things in life, good communication requires building good habits. And that takes consistent, deliberate practice over time.
Yeah. So just give us, I know there are many frameworks, just give us an example of one that could, so imagine you're preparing for a meeting and you've got to contribute at a particular point, perhaps it's your slot or there's a topic that you'll be expected to speak, and you sort of know what you want to say. Obviously you'll be flexible in the moment, but you want to do it in the way you just described. Give us a framework that we could use to prepare ourselves.
Sure, I'll give you a couple with a couple of different situations. And 3-part frameworks are really good. So there are lots of different 3-part frameworks, easy for me to say, that we could use. One, for example, could be if you're sharing an idea, you're in a meeting and everyone's being asked to contribute ideas for new market growth strategy. And you have an idea that could influence or impact the market growth of your organization in the next year. To structure that message, you might want to start by using a past, present, future structure. Hey everyone, I've got an idea. This is what happened last year. This is what we're seeing this year. My idea will produce this for the future. Past, nice. Present, future. Simple structure, but it helps organize your information in a way that's logical, that flows in the natural order of time and also stops you just going bleh and dumping information onto everybody else.
Oh, what was the second one?
And another one would be, and this is one of my favorites, it's in the first minute, and it's goal, problem, solution. And this can be used to give updates, to ask questions, to ask for input, to answer interview questions. And it works like this. If you want to, let's say I wanted to ask you, you're my boss, David, I want to ask you for approval for something. What I do is I come to you and I say, David, I'm trying to achieve this project milestone by next Friday. That's my goal. The problem is Emma is out this week. She's been pulled onto a more important project, and I'm a person down. What I would like to do about it is borrow someone from a different team or have an extension. Which one of those can we discuss? And I've laid out the goal I'm trying to achieve, the problem that's standing between me and achieving that goal, and the solution that I'm proposing, or I'm explaining what I've done or what I want to do. And that structure avoids a very common problem with communication at work. And the problem is backward conversations. And you're probably wondering what a backward conversation is. So here's a backwards conversation. Hey, David, or hey, boss, can I have your approval to buy this thing? What is the first question the boss is likely to have?
Why do you need it?
Why do I need it? Oh, well, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to overcome this particular challenge. The next question is, well, why is that important? Oh, because we're trying to do X, Y, and Z. What we're doing is moving further and further away from the request that I've made, further into the past, and we're actually going back through the problem and to the goal. So instead of saying, can I have this thing? I need it to solve this problem because I'm trying to achieve that goal. Just give that information up front. Trying to
it's
achieve
also
this
harder
goal.
on the listener. I mean, listening to that, even though it's short, the first one was beautiful because it was succinct, punchy. It was frankly easy for me to get. This one, I'm having to ask more questions. And although I'm a very mild-mannered person, after a while, if I get to the fifth or sixth question, I'll be like, come on, I've had enough. So the one thing I really like about the way you, both the framework and both frameworks and the way you said it, is that it felt natural. I have come across people who perhaps have swallowed too many frameworks or don't do it very eloquently, and they use the descriptors in the language. So they say, my goal is, the problem is, and I just go, please. So how do you, when you're using these structures, do you keep it natural as opposed to, oh, I can see you're using that framework, and it's like you become a little bit more of a robot?
Yes, well, it's slightly awkward because I use the label. So one of the things that I do...
But you didn't then. That's work. That you didn't then in the way you described it.
Listen, when you listen back to this would be a great experiment because I think I did use the labels. So either I'm misremembering or they came across naturally. So that'll be a great experiment. I've got some
short-term memory issues myself.
Yeah.
So that's a separate issue. That's a separate podcast.
Anyone listening to this could just rewind 30, 60 seconds and have a listen again. So Wellness has got two parts. The first part is if you're trying to learn a new method, the labels can help. And in the example before, I used past, present, and future. I said, in the past, we're doing this. At the moment, and it's sort of a label for present. And in the future, we want to do this. That's using the labels, but naturally building them in to the framework. With goal, problem, solution, when I was teaching myself the habit of using this, I would literally use those words. I say, hey, David, the goal I've got is this, or the thing I'm trying to achieve is. So you can use some slightly different words, but the label is still there. By using the labels and turning them into my own phrases, I give myself guideposts for the conversation, and I give you guideposts and signposts and structure for where the conversation is going. So to really answer the question of how do you make it sound natural, practice it and find your voice and the turns of phrase that work for you and your style of speech.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, as a segue, I know you work with many organizations where there are lots of self-appointed experts, technical people. Perhaps they really are, or they think they are. And the challenge is, how do they communicate to people who they may think are non-technical experts. I often think they just have a different background. But imagine you are somebody listening to this and you think, hey, look, you know what? I know a hell of a lot. I'm a real expert. I've got lots of terminology. And you know you will be speaking to colleagues, clients, whomever it is, from a range of backgrounds. How can they cut through in a way where the audience gets who they are, rather than thinking that sounded very impressive, but I need a dictionary now to figure it
out? Well, the first part of the answer is I don't recall an occasion, actually, I recall one or two occasions out of thousands of people that I've met where somebody really did think of themselves in that way and they were consciously saying, I'm an expert, I'm going to show it. I believe it's very rare that our colleagues actively want to come across in that way. Mm-hmm. However, experience shows us jargon is everywhere and it does make it very difficult to understand. But I think there's a reason why. And the reason is jargon isn't bad. Jargon, in fact, is brilliant in our job. Because instead of the word jargon, if we think expert language, someone in a particular role has expert language connected to that role, and that language helps them be more efficient in that role. Think of an accountant talking to another accountant. They can use acronyms, they can use terminology that may be completely alien to you and I, but it's shorthand for them. It makes them more effective at their job. The trouble comes when we have to communicate with people outside our expertise, and we just forget that other people don't speak the same language as us. Mm. And that is the reason that jargon is so bad. And it's an awareness piece. The same thing happens in national languages. If a French person is speaking to a Spanish person, and they're speaking, the Spanish person speaks Spanish and French, if the French person doesn't slow down, enunciate more clearly, or use a slightly simpler language, a slightly simpler words, it's going to be harder for the Spanish person to understand. That's a learned skill, being aware of the other person's limitations and adapting for it. That's how we solve the jargon problem. Be aware of our expertise, be aware of our audience, and then try and find common language, common words, rather than the expert words that we use connected to our job.
That's so clear. But you keep emphasizing, awareness and doing the awareness of them, doing the work, thinking about it rather than just skipping over it, which may be the laziness, poor time management, or frankly, a bit of arrogance too. But you just got to do the work. And let's keep going on this topic. You referred earlier to ChatGPT, and there'll be other AI tools available, of course. Although I use that and use many others, I'm sure you do. That can be an amplifier. That can be a useful, I call it a teammate, but it also can be, I guess, it can be a tool that people overuse and you lose your language, your style in the way you just described. Mm. As you're thinking about whether it could be emails, that may be a nice segue onto another topic you've written a book on. Is there a topic you haven't written a book on yet? Of course.
A few, but there are more books coming.
But think about the power of AI. You're trying to up your game in communication. Mm. How do you think of it in a high level? And then perhaps give us some examples where you think actually it could really help you communicate in this way.
Yes, AI, this has got to be the most common question that I get asked at the moment, and I can see it being asked for the next few years because it's not going away. I'm going to start with why I think AI is not a replacement for learning communication skills. I think that's one of the headlines I want to get across. Using any AI tool, ChatGPT, other tools are available, any tool is not a replacement for learning the skills. And here's why. If you wanted to write me an email at work, you could go to an AI tool and then ask it to write the email. The problem is that tool does not know the topic, your intent, what you want from me, or any of the background information that might be necessary for nuance. So you have to put all of that in, and you have to put it into the tool clearly enough that it can write an email. Well, if you're doing that, just put that in the email, and then you've written the email.
Yes.
There's a cartoon that came out, it must have been about 2 years ago now, and it's two blocks next to each other. Person sitting at a computer saying, AI turned my one sentence into a one-page email, and he hit send. And then the next screen is AI took this one-page email and turned it into one sentence for me so I could read it.
Right.
And it perfectly captures the idea that, one, it's more efficient. Two, we need to write long emails. We don't. And three, that the AI is going to know how to do it. So at the risk of running long, I'm going to re-emphasize these points. If you're writing a good email to someone, you've got a clear topic. The intention needs to be clear. What do you want the other person to do? And then you have to put in very clear points. All of that is what you'd put into an AI tool anyway. So skip that step and just learn how to write a good email.
Okay. So that's very powerful. Now thinking my next few emails after this podcast, but I'm not. Clearly, I'm focused right now. But where can it be used to amplify communication? Where can it be used, positively? You think perhaps where you've used it or a client's used it and thought, wow, that's really taken me from good to better or to great.
Yes, it's really helpful as a learning, teaching, practicing aid. If, real example, I needed to write a response, I needed to write a statement of work response in a different country. I didn't know what the standard format was for that.
Yes.
I went to the AI tool and said, can you give me 2 different statement of work templates? I checked them against a couple of internet searches as well, but they were good. That's my own lack of confidence in the tools yet, because they're still fallible. Yeah. But it gave me a structure, and then it gave me a worked example. So I could see the framework of, well, this is what the first section, second section, third section are, and here's an example of how it can look. I've done similar things in a client was saying, how do I ask for a certain thing from my boss? Yeah. Now, ideally, go and have a conversation. If you can't do that, there was a way to structure a message. And we worked through some examples live, but they wanted more practice. So I said, go to a chat tool and ask it, how would you structure this? And ask it to give you 2 or 3 different ways that you could deliver a certain message. And the brilliant thing about it is not only does it give you templates and structures, but it can give you alternatives so that you can choose the one that best fits your style.
Yes.
But you have to ask for the alternatives.
Yes, you do. But again, there is a skill in. It sounds obvious. There is a skill in using it and feeding it, and it's not a sort of one-off. It can learn. You can learn from it. It can. So I love the way you describe it as a learning aid. Can
I share a story as to how painful this can be? Anyone who has worked with anyone who's sort of in their, call it 30s to 50s, and has helped either a parent or a child look up something online, has probably experienced the frustration of watching somebody else search for something in a way that feels very inefficient. Don't type that. Why are you typing the full question? That's not how it's described. And that process is, we've learned how to do it. Those in the 30 to 50s that have grew up in the internet age and have got some experience with it. So we know a little bit, or at least we think we know, how to structure queries, how to be efficient when searching online. But when we go to AI, the types of queries we ask, because we're all learning how to use this tool, we've become like our parents or children, and we're the ones doing those awkward, clunky. You have to learn how to do a good Google search. Same thing, you have to learn how to do a good query, and it comes through trial, error, practice, and getting help. Go and take a free 15-minute YouTube course on how do you write a good prompt.
Speak for yourself. It really is such a good point. Such a good point. Let's continue this theme of sort of how do you do it for real with or without AI. And I want to give you some sort of real life scenarios now. So imagine you're working with a new leader, whether it's a new CEO or a functional business unit leader. She or he wants to get it right from the off. There's the first day, and obviously they have many forms of communication. What would you, and you had 10 minutes with them, don't spend 10 minutes now, but if you had a few minutes with them in advance just to make sure that they get their communications right, what would you say to them?
Okay, the very quick bit is listen first, ask questions first. So that's very common advice for anyone in a leadership position, in any position really. Assuming that general advice has been done, I would suggest that they find time to have a one-to-one conversation with their most frequent stakeholders and talk about the work, paying attention to the language the stakeholder uses. And you can be as overt as saying, hey, I'm new in this role. I want to make sure that how I communicate with you makes sense and we're speaking the same language, and have a conversation about the work. Here's why it's important. An senior IT developer was excellent at their job, and they got promoted into a position where they were going to regularly communicate with the business. This was in a big US health insurance company. The IT person always used the names of the systems when talking to the business. We've got this data layer, we've got this blah, 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 this database name, this tool, this system. And it meant nothing to the business stakeholder because they called it the sales system.
Yes, quite.
They didn't call it the JX35 or whatever it happened to be. They called it the sales system. As soon as that developer had spent just one 30-minute conversation with their business stakeholders saying, can you explain to me how you see our systems? Talk to me about your side of the work. And they wrote down every terminology, every piece of every name, every description that the business used. And they wrote their own, in full brilliant developer style, they wrote their own little translation box. When they say this, it means this. And in the future, they used that.
So I love the fact that you call out actually having a conversation about how to communicate and the language to use. I mean, I think that's brilliant. Let's continue the scenario. So imagine you are feeling under pressure, whether in a one-to-one conversation or in a meeting. You know you need to say something important, but you feel the pressure, whether it's your own expectation, whether it's the dynamics of the room. How do you still communicate in the way you want to, even when you're feeling, tight, under pressure, stressed?
Step 1, pause. Step 2, take at least one breath before you speak. Those two things by themselves will help you answer better and help you regulate the emotions. The power of the pause is more than just getting people's attention or really emphasizing a point. The power of the pause, physiologically inside, our body chemistry changes. If we have an emotional response and you feel something rising, I feel I need to defend myself. How dare you say that about me, my team, my work? Just pause. You don't have to make the breath as overt as that.
Yeah. No,
pause, breathe,
pause and breath,
and give yourself a moment. And here's why that is so important. That couple of seconds is worth 8 to 10 seconds of thinking time. And here's why. We think at 800 words a minute. We speak at 150. So we get 4 and a bit times as much stuff in our head goes as fast as comes out of our mouth. So by pausing for a couple of seconds, not only can you have a better chance of not letting your emotions rush out through your mouth, but you also get the equivalent of 8 seconds of speech, but to think. And you can then say, okay, how do I want to structure this? What is the thing I want to say first? And it gives you that moment.
Oh, I love that. Especially the numbers, the geek in me. I love that. So many of us are working more in hybrid situations where people might be, so a meeting, for example, some people may be in an office environment, some people virtually. In some cases, you might think, well, that's not a radical shift, but it is a different dynamic if you've grown up in all face-to-face, or actually there are some organizations where it's all remote. So it's a more mixed hybrid ecology. What do we need to do differently or think about differently when it comes to communication when we're doing hybrid meetings?
Yeah, if we're hybrid, it takes a lot more concentration and you have to consciously make an effort. I spent a number of years working with teams that were 3/4 in the room and 1/4 on the other side of the country on the phone.
Yes.
And it takes real effort to talk to the phone, to remember to engage the person on the phone.
Yes.
To provide moments for them to give input, and not just input on ideas, but what we're missing is the body language and the social cues. So even now, unless I put my hands up like this for those who are watching it, unless I put my hands up, you can't see them. I could have them in my pockets, drumming my fingers, you wouldn't know. But if we were in front of each other and I was doing that, you'd notice even if you were looking in my eyes, because we pay attention to peripheral stuff.
Yes.
All of that disappears in a hybrid environment. So you have to provide a way to enable people to be part of that conversation, to react. And you have to ask for reactions, because you can't see somebody rolling their
So
eyes.
it's being more intentional, actually drawing them in, asking, noticing. But in some ways, just building on your point, it requires more work. It's harder work. You feel more tired.
Yes. Keep everything shorter online. It is more tiring for a whole bunch of reasons. And since COVID, there have been a lot of opportunities to study the impacts on stress, engagement, etc. online. Even right now, I'm looking at the camera rather than looking in your eyes. So I've had to learn how to read peripheral vision body language to see whether or not I'm going on too long. Yeah. And are you beginning to give me visual cues while I'm still looking at the camera? So when you, that
was a nodding off for those listening.
He put his head on the table. But while trying to I'm thinking about the end viewer on this, and I'm looking at the camera because that's more engaging to watch rather than looking at your eyes, where I'm now on the camera. It looks like I'm not paying attention.
Yes.
So it's harder for me, because I'm having to remember the end user while paying attention to your body language. While it requires more.
I completely agree. I have my own version of that. I completely agree. So another scenario would be you're in a conversation or meeting. You're trying to, if you like, cut through. You're trying to speak up, and you're finding it hard, either because you're new to the group, you're part of a marginalized group that's frankly always ignored or spoken over, interrupted. Often people of, women in all male meetings, people of different races and so forth. But you want to speak, you really want to, but you're finding it hard to sort of cut through and speak up in the way you want to. What tips would you give people in that context?
It's a really tough. Any of those situations are difficult, and every one of them is kind of unique. So in terms of very specific advice, I can't give exact words to use. What I can give for a leader or anybody wondering, what do I do in a certain situation? This may sound a little daft, but go and find the YouTube short or the TikTok video about that situation, because there are some really good short, entertaining videos about specific situations. Lady in the boardroom.
Here's one then. I mean, let's speak about you. And I'm not trying to. You're absolutely right. Everything is unique. But imagine you're in a meeting with clients, and people are just speaking 100 miles an hour. And frankly, they're not giving much space. They're not doing what we just described, which is reaching out to the rest of the group. Is there 2 or 3 people dominating? Just think about that scenario. And Chris, I want to say something. How do you get in without being, like a steamroller and being really blunt and direct, and people thinking, how dare you?
Not throwing your stuff across the desk.
Yeah. So that scenario, how would you cope with that?
So if you're in the room, there's a very good body language piece. This is just about the only piece of body language I ever teach, which is put your hand up in front of you, not out like you're trying to stop a car, and not all the way up like you're trying to ask a question in high school, but open palm out, motion towards the person, because it's a little bit of stop, it's a little bit of notice me, it's a little bit of I've got a question. And you say, sorry, excuse me, hi, can I just interrupt just for a moment? Thank you, sorry, I'd like to.
Yes.
So it's a very gentle interrupt, and find your own words. That's how I do it. I tend to soften it maybe a little too much. But say, hey David, sorry, I know you're mid-flow, but can I just...
Yes, that works.
And then it depends what you want to do. You might say, can I go back to a point you made a moment ago? You've mentioned 2 or 3 things, and I think there's something really important that I'd like to clarify. Or you might summarize. If somebody is waxing lyrical and they've been going on, and you're not the only one in the room who needs this to move on, you could say, hey David, sorry, I just want to check something. I want to make sure I'm understanding this. I'm going to summarize back what I've heard. And you say, so we're trying to do this. Goal problem solution is great for this. Yes. I hear you're talking about the goal we've got, and there's a number of problems, and you're proposing this. At that point, you've changed it from a monologue to a dialogue.
Yes, beautiful.
And you've got that opportunity for question. They answer it. And the great thing about using a structure and asking for clarity by summarizing is they're either going to say, no, that's not right, Then you get new information that is right when they clarify, or they say, yes, that's right, in which case you can say, great, and you have a chance to move the conversation on to where it needs to be.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Let's dive into a bit more about you. Of course, we talk about the work of the guest, of course, in different shapes and forms. But I want to understand you and who you are. Just think about when you think about people you admire. Whether it's reading their work in a book or an article. Apart from myself, of course, or you listen to them on a podcast. Who are the people that come to mind where you think, yes, well, they are great communicators? Who'll be on your top 3 list, perhaps?
I've got a group of people and an individual. So I'll do the individual first because it's very easy. Jeremy Connell-Waite. He works at IBM, and he gives away everything for free. And if you want to tell stories in a business capacity, he is the person to go and listen to.
Okay.
He breaks down all the top speeches from history, from CEOs on stage.
Say his name again.
Jeremy Connell-Waite.
Okay, brilliant.
And he does very good visualizations of them as well, and has a ton of resources.
Okay.
So absolutely fantastic person. The second is a group of people, and it blows my mind every time I hear this group of people doing their job. And it's football or soccer commentators commentating on the radio. They are phenomenal communicators, and for a few reasons. First of all, they're translating a fast-paced visual situation into something you can understand just by listening when you're in a totally different place.
Yes.
That by itself is a phenomenal skill. And they do it in a way that is factual and entertaining. They can react in the moment and explain what's going on and then go back and unpack when needed. And here's the kicker. It was in the late 90s, early 2000s. There was a study on fewest mistakes made by public communicators. And in 1,000 words, they made the fewest mistakes per 1,000 words in terms of misspeaking, mispronouncing, bad grammar or stumbling. Now, perhaps things have changed since we've gone from radio to far more pundit online, but the 1990s, early 2000s, football, soccer commentators, that is a masterclass.
And you used the word kicker in the middle of that, which I thought was particularly clever. You said, here's the kicker. And I thought that was particularly clever. So that was unintentional on your part. But hey, in terms of you do a lot of work in this space, and you're an avid learner, and I've worked with you. I've been one of your clients, and I've benefited immensely from your work. What's the biggest shift you've made in the last year in terms of how you communicate?
In the last year, I've started using visual aids more than ever before.
Yes, I enjoy them. Look at them on LinkedIn posts. Yes.
That's the artist in you. I've always been a talker, and people who've known me my whole life will roll their eyes and go, oh, he's always been a talker. I like talking and I like spreadsheets, but visualization was something I told myself I wasn't good at. And I knew theoretically that it was, or I knew academically, that visuals are an incredibly powerful method of communicating something. The phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words, is very true. But I'd avoided it because I thought I'm bad at art.
Right.
And I changed for 2 reasons. One, there's a very interesting TED talk that shows you how you can be an artist and draw people and faces and things. And it's worth 15 minutes in a pen and paper just to go, oh, I can actually produce something that's better than my 4-year-old. And the second part was seeing the power of really simple visuals to explain concepts and ideas. Quite often there'll be what people think versus what it actually takes to achieve something. There'll be a pie chart with 1 or 2 things and then a reality. Those don't teach you very much, but they simplify abstract or large concepts into a way that become easy to understand.
If you understand, they engage you more immediately as well. So apart from as you're learning to visualize and use your artistic prowess, what would you call out in a nutshell, there's the hint, your superpower?
Being able to explain complex things in a simple, structured way.
Brilliant. And more philosophically, through your brilliant work, what's the impact you're looking to have on the world around you?
I'd like to make, and it sounds a little cheesy, but I'd like to just make work a little bit easier for everyone. If our days could be 5% easier, a little bit less time in meetings, a little more clarity in an email, fewer assumptions and mistakes, and more confidence that what you say is clear and understood and respected, that would be really nice. Because I think it's so much easier than we believe it is. We just need to be shown and helped how. And you show how and then helped to build those habits.
That's so purposeful and very, very vivid and clear. I love that. And if you're thinking about your best day, imagine your best day where everything's going swimmingly, you're performing really, really well. What helps you do that in terms of practices, habits, mindsets? What would you call out?
Proactively removing distractions before I do deep work. If I really need to think about something, it's not just phone upside down on the table, it's phone away, it's don't open the email or the LinkedIn tab. And none of this is groundbreaking, but that's what I need to do. But I also need to make sure I haven't just put a load of washing on so that I know I hear when the laundry's finished. I'll just go and do that.
Yes.
And then starting. The most powerful thing, all of that aside, the most powerful thing is starting. Because I suffer from the job is bigger in my mind than it is when I start doing it. Yeah. And things are usually easier once I just get down and do it. I had a list of things this morning I've been putting off for a week, and half an hour later they were done. I'm like, what? They've been living in my head for more than half an hour this week.
You're so right. And I interject because I feel it as you speak. I'm writing, as you know, a proposal for a book which feels I have fear, I have excitement, I have a lot of emotion around it. Not in the sense of I'm crying my eyes out before I do the work, but it feels much bigger than it is. And I keep saying to myself, and you reminding me now, it's okay, just start doing writing the next page. You've got this. So I think that's brilliant. Look, Chris, you have covered so much ground. You practice what you preach brilliantly. I mean, there are so many tips from emails to meetings to conversations and specific scenarios that I know many of us show up in. Where can we find out more about your work online?
Yep, my website, which is my name, chrisfenning.com. And as you mentioned before, the stuff I put out is on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is my social hangout, and my website sort of showcases the things that I offer. And there's a ton of free resources.
Yeah, you're very generous. You're very generous. Many great resources, and of course, so many good books. And of course, if you're an organization wanting expert communications advice, coaching, training courses, Chris is your person. I personally vouch for that, having been a client. Chris, what a wonderful conversation. That was another edition of Lancefield on the Line. I do hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Please do check out the other episodes in this series. Sign up to the YouTube channel, to the podcast. Go on, give us a 5-star rating. And most importantly, say thank you to Chris again. Chris, thank you.